Hello, welcome to Security, Cryptography, whatever. I'm Deirdre.
I'm David.
My wife made me sick.
Aw. Thomas isn't going to talk very much. And it's just us today. We wanted to visit before we all head off to Vegas in a couple of weeks because we have some very important news. We're having our first in-person, in-the-flesh event in Vegas for Black Hat USA this year, or Black Hat/DEF CON or whatever. It's going to be Thursday, August 8th, 7:30 to 9:30 at a place on the Strip. We would love to see your friendly faces in the flesh from across the internet, but we have a capacity limited spot. So there will be an Eventbrite link in the show notes, and please go to that link and fulfill our call to action and actually sign up so you can actually be part of the capacity limited crowd. And that's where you'll find out the exact location on the Strip. And we are very excited to have a sponsor for our event. Observa is sponsoring our little event. Thank you, Observa.
Observa is pretty cool. Observa is Rob Picard and Luca Caratoni and John Villanelle, all Monsanto people. So Observa does security programs for startups. I don't think you could find three people that you would rather have as your security team for your startup than those three people. So Observa, check them out. They're very cool.
Yes, we are all very excited to have the event in Vegas. Thank you to Observa for sponsoring the event. And please keep an eye on either the episode notes or our social media to get tickets to the event.
Looking forward to seeing you all there. David did all the legwork to make this happen. So if it goes well, he gets all the credit. And if it doesn't, we will never speak of it again.
Moonlighting as a marketing event coordinator has always been my dream.
It cannot possibly go worse than the Microsoft gathering where they bust us out into the middle of the desert to wait in an hour-long line for one drink and then another hour to get bussed back.
Oh,
it was the most amazing meetup I've ever been to.
We can say this event is on the Strip. It is easy to get to.
Yes. And it is near some frequent locations of the kind of DEF CON affiliated hotel universes.
And it's not far from the In-N-Out Burger.
Oh, good.
We will not kidnap you. At no point in this will you wonder whether this was an elaborate scheme to get all the security researchers out into the desert to kill them.
Hopefully it will go better than the event. I don't remember who hosted it by, but it was at the Hustlers Club. And I got to see John McAfee there before he died. And that was fun. Speaking of McAfee and things that are supposed to make your computer safer.
That's never a good transition. Speaking of McAfee.
There was a major international information technology event.
I think y'all are taking this a little too seriously. This particular event.
I woke up to a text from my mother about this outage.
Excuse me, this affected me personally. I tried to order a Starbucks and their entire mobile ordering system was broken across the United States as far as I could tell because of CrowdStrike, aka ClownStrike.
Important question, what's your Starbucks order?
Now it has evolved into a Trenta Berry Summer Refresher, it's just the blue one. They introduced a new flavor. It's effectively blue raspberry refresher drink with caffeine in it. No bubbles, light ice, and then I usually get the feta cheese wrap with egg in it, or I get an egg white egg bite, or I've discovered that they have a cheese Danish, and I'll get the cheese Danish if I don't want something proteiny. Anyway.
Is the Trenta like the big gulp?
Yes, it is like 32 ounces of drink. Yes. And so I get a big gulp worth of blue flavored, like vaguely grape drink with 100 milligrams of caffeine in it or something like that because it's large. Anyway, so if you were under the rug of most of yesterday, we're recording on Saturday the 20th, yesterday, Friday, July 19th, CrowdStrike, who operates exploit detection and remediation system. Is that what EDR stands for?
Endpoint detection and response. So endpoint security, which is corporate antivirus and sometimes corporate configuration management.
Yeah, I got one of the words right. They are extremely popular on a whole bunch of operating systems, but apparently they were particularly hit on their Windows systems for everybody on latest and probably latest -1 or something like that. I saw that somewhere. I don't know if that's true, but a lot of their deployed Windows fleet, which is companies, organizations across the world, all of them received an update, not to the software, but to a piece of content that gets parsed by their software. And their parser is in a kernel module for the Windows kernel. And when your parser panics inside your kernel module loaded into the Windows kernel, guess what? Your fucking computer panics and reboots and reboots and reboots until you can get to it and say, stop that. Please unload any foreign kernel drivers or kernel plugins or whatever, which is called safe mode for Windows, so that you can try to boot into Windows, remove the offending files, because it's just a file that a existing parser was trying to parse because it got pushed. You can remove that and actually try to restart Windows again safely. For a lot of people, you had to go manually to these machines.
As somebody who will never be able to run a deploy again without having a small panic attack, which is a consequence of spending 4 years now working on a public cloud, I have nothing but sympathy for the CrowdStrike people. And also whoever ran that build is my favorite person in the world for a variety of reasons. People are nuts about like what happened here and like the consequences of this, and like nobody can imagine how like a company like this could have let this happen. But like this is the natural state of all software. It's what's weird is that it hasn't happened 100 times before.
Yeah, because it does seem like this is a parser bug that's been there for a length of time, and it was just finally triggered by this, whatever new rule, new like signature that they were trying to parse with their parser, and it got triggered. And the all zeros like content thing they were trying to parse is one instance of something that can trigger this parser bug, which is like a null pointer dereference in their parser. Well, number one, why is this parser living in a kernel plugin in the first place, a kernel driver? It feels like we've learned not to do that sort of thing, especially for less privileged stuff. But that's exactly what's happening here.
I think generally you're right? Like there's a question. I mean, I'm no expert on what CrowdStrike's product is specifically trying to achieve. But, the issue here is less on like, automatic updates are bad, and more on like, why is there so much privileged code running in the kernel if it could have been in user space, right? Like how big is this kernel drive generally, and could it be made smaller? In this case, I don't know what the threat model and the trust boundaries are around the CrowdStrike's driver. So like you would think, just parse those malware definitions, not in the kernel. Like why would you parse it in the kernel? But what happens, is there some way that you can verify that it was parsed correctly, right? Like if part of your threat model is there's something running at user privileges, like do you want that thing at user privileges to be able to somehow then like alter the output of that file and replace the malware signatures with zeros or just delete them, right? There's probably a way to accomplish this where the parsing is not done in the kernel, and you can still reach that trust boundary. But I'm no expert on Windows.
But your CrowdStrike here, you're operating at a scale where malware is built specifically to defeat CrowdStrike, right? Like most security products, your adversaries, like security products in general, like things that you pay money for to make you more secure or whatever, no adversary in the world gives a shit about anything that you do. CrowdStrike is the rare exception to this, right? Where it is worth somebody's time to write a couple hundred lines of code to defeat CrowdStrike. So if there's a thing you can do where you can jam up, a userland Windows service and thus keep it from getting updates or keep it from detecting or something like that, this is not me vouching for the model of hoisting all of your security stuff into the Windows kernel. I don't think that's a great thing to be doing, but you can see why they would do it that way, right? They actually do have adversaries that are,
Yeah, I mean, the Windows model, there's user to admin. Lots of people just run as admin. That's becoming less common on Windows 10 and Windows 11. But more or less, there aren't really a lot of per process protections, and those that exist are still very hard to reason about in a way that other platforms kind of offer more. But Windows is in a little bit of a bind here because they're such an old platform and they're so big. Like if they say, we don't actually want things to work like this, we're going to like shrink some of what you can do in a kernel module or change it. Like, oops, like not letting third parties do something is an antitrust, and continuing to let third parties do things is, well, Microsoft gets blamed when a driver crashes. So it's a bit of a rock and a hard place there.
But also like Linux doesn't have these anti-competitive like hawks watching it because they're Linux and not Microsoft Windows.
They also don't have users.
That's why. That's why they don't have anti-competitive hawks. But CrowdStrike also works on, they have a Mac OS version, but it doesn't seem like it's as capable, and it seems to be slower on Mac OS because I'm assuming because of the way that the Mac OS kernel is architected. But I guess it's just not the same competitive base as Microsoft and Windows. So.
And maybe it has the same bug and they just didn't push out a bad definitions file to Mac.
Or maybe it does and it just doesn't cause a panic. Or maybe the panic is caught, or whatever it is. It doesn't cause a full system kernel panic or something like that.
If I were a kernel, I would simply not panic.
If I were a null pointer, I would simply not be dereferenceable.
What do you think, Deirdre? Does Rust fix this?
It actually does not, because if you did everything, if you wrote this parser and you're still like pointing at pieces of memory via kernel boundaries and blah, 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 you're still dereferencing uncontrollable pieces of memory. I don't think Rust would actually help this.
It has option types. You would never have a null to begin with.
Oh, so it's not the memory safety, it's the nullness. We have lots of languages that don't have the stupidity of null, so yeah.
You would have like a none where you expected a sum, and there's no way to dereference a none in Rust.
Okay.
Aside from the specific keyword used for doing that like explanation point, right? Like, what happens when you panic in Rust inside the kernel? Is that a kernel panic?
It's a kernel module written in Rust, and it's all unwraps instead of matches.
Yep.
Excellent.
Yep. It's like, oh, we did it. We did the right thing. It's like, yeah, no.
I mean, presumably you would like not do that a ton, but like I think the point is that a crash in the kernel module is still a crash in the kernel module, regardless if it's actually a null pointer deref, or if it's just like, oh, the language has saved me by asserting on this bounds check or this null check for me, but oh well, once it asserted, like you still crashed.
Yeah.
This has been our 2 minutes of Rust humor. You read like a lot of stuff about like what CrowdStrike is and like what EDR things are. And it's like, it's all very simple, right? This is just what people run in 2024 instead of antivirus. Yeah. So, compliance regimes and like IT security practices, like, if you look at a Fortune 500 company, they've had like a large scale IT security practice for the last 30 years, right? Some of this is just logic that is handed down from generation to generation that something has to be running on every endpoint. It used to be, McAfee, AV or Semantic AV, and now it's CrowdStrike. And honestly, you're better off now by a lot. Right? You would much, much rather be running CrowdStrike, where they every once in a while push out a build that crashes every Windows machine on the planet, than running AV engines that were all written in like the late 1980s. There's like so much chatter going on. This is like the biggest thing that's ever happened for IT nerds in the last several years, so people can't shut up about it. And
everyone keeps saying that this is what Y2K was going to be like if Y2K actually happened, and I don't know if that is actually
so extremely
correct.
Mild.
I don't know if this is actually correct.
Everyone say your age at Y2K.
Unfortunately, like maybe the impact, like one-time impact, is at the large scale that we were afraid of for Y2K, but the remediation is quite easy compared to Y2K. Like Y2K basically required the most critical pieces getting rewritten, the code getting rewritten, versus this is just like, there is a step-by-step thing you can do. It's not fun. You have to go find your, host and go into safe mode, remove a file, and then reboot it, 10 times perhaps. But like, we know what to do. It's not, you have to rewrite all your software. So I don't know.
I have a bone to pick here, and I think David will appreciate this particular bone I have to pick here. I'm again dragging the Orange site into this conversation, although this particular Orange site drama links back to Twitter, so it's also Twitter drama. But some enterprising souls have uncovered the interesting detail that George Kurtz, the CEO of CrowdStrike, was at one point the CTO of McAfee, the quote unquote CTO of McAfee, during an era where McAfee also pushed out a bum updater that, broke everybody that was running McAfee. And my problem here is that no one knows what the hell a CTO does. So there's I can't get the picture out of my head that these people are imagining George Kurtz sitting there on his computer writing software updaters. So David, what does a CTO do?
I mean, it depends, but I would say CTO is mostly like not a real title, and it is actually just like a title that you have when you're in a different role, but you need to sound cool. Those roles being technical co-founder, which is a perfectly valid form of CTO and arguably the most valid form of CTO. It's like you have someone at the company who has a lot of equity, a lot of institutional knowledge, and is kind of driving the technical product direction. That's, your technical co-founder. There is like CTO is actually just a VP of engineering, in that they're like in charge of eng execution. I would argue like you should get your title to be VP engineering in that case. Again, if you are a VP of engineering, you're not writing a software updater.
No.
And then there's like sufficiently
or
large
a parser
company
or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. The CTO that is actually a VP eng is like not writing parsers, right? They're looking at Jira tickets and they're writing OKRs. And then the other case is like you're a big-ish public company and you kind of need someone at roughly the C-suite level to go around and talk about technology to other people at the C-suite level. And that person is usually someone who used to be a VP eng at somewhere big. So for example, like the CTO of Microsoft, I believe, used to be the VP eng at Salesforce.
I have a simpler breakdown of CTOs than you do. They're equally valid breakdowns. They're both worth hearing, right? You have like the OSI model of CTOs and I have the IETF model. But and I want to caveat this by saying that none of this applies to the CTO of Flat.io, Jerome, who I adore and is amazing, and also spends all day and all night rewriting every line of code that I've ever written. So this is definitely not him. But my general breakdown of CTOs is that there's three types. There is the type where it is the consolation prize that the founder gets when they take away his commit privileges, finally, when there's a real engineering team. That's the first kind, right? And then there's the kind of CTO you are when you are the CEO of a large company that gets bought by another company where they're not making you the CEO. They have to give you a C something title. So it's CTO, which just basically means the CEO of the product line that is now part of this bigger company. And the third kind of CTO is the sucker who took the CTO title instead of pushing for more compensation at a small company that shouldn't have a CTO at all. Those are the three kinds of CTOs there are, right? And like, if you ask me what the most important job skill of a CTO is, it is identifying themselves as the CTO on a call with a customer prospect. That is it. That is the CTO skill. That is what they do.
Very important.
Like the idea that a CTO is doing any kind of technical work whatsoever. But people think they're like, it's like they're the lead programmer in the company. They're like, it's like chief scientist, like they're doing the most science. It's the same thing, right? It's a title that has absolutely nothing to do with what in my experience, has absolutely nothing to do with what the title sounds like. So no, people, I don't think that there is much of a George Kurtz connection with the broken updaters.
Now we have to do CISOs and CSOs.
Our advice on that one is never accept that title. Even if that's your role, just get any other title.
Yeah. It's the connection between these two, and any incident with McAfee and any incident with CrowdStrike is like coincidental at best.
I mean, if you do get the CSO title, just remember like the Mesoamerican cultures where like before they sacrifice you, you get like a couple of days of everyone just treating you really awesome and you get to eat whatever you want. Just make sure you're getting all of the stuff that you can possibly get before the day of sacrifice.
Absolutely. You are there to be fired when there is a security incident. That has traditionally been the rule. So like we did kind of, do our little hug ops bit about like, this is like the fear of anyone that pushes out updates, whether they are actual code patch updates to, your deployments or configuration updates that can have almost as much or equally as much impact because they are executable instructions by the executing software or whatever, which is basically what happened in this case. But like, this thing, as far as we can tell, the configuration update or signature or whatever it is, got pushed out between 4 a.m. and about 5:30 a.m. UTC yesterday. And it was all zeros as far as we can see. And it, like, people have claimed to replicate the panic with, content that's being parsed. It's not just all zeros. How do we prevent problems like this? Well, the problem is that we don't have the procedures in place and people in organizations that allow this problem to occur. Not now. There's a meme
takes
about
long
this.
Drag. Thank you,
Yeah,
Amy.
it takes a long drag on a cigarette. It's like, yes, the root cause analysis, your 5 whys, whatever you want to call it, the blameless postmortem will eventually like zoom in on there was a pipeline, procedures, pressures, checks that either were in place and not followed, or they were all in place and followed and were insufficient, or there was a bug in the pipeline, in either the CI testing pipeline or the CD deployment and packaging pipeline. And, someone claimed on the internet, like, oh, this was supposed to only go to, the client staging environments and it overrode that, or, we don't know enough now. There's a lot of speculation, but, having a thing that's basically all zeros get pushed out feels like something that we should be able to flag. And it's unclear whether it was built and tested and passed all the tests with all zeros, or if it passed all the tests and then it got built and after that it turned into all zeros and nothing would catch that or whatever. So I'm very curious. I want to learn more, and we'll see if there's anything that we'll learn publicly about this. But I'm very interested in sort of like the pipeline, the procedures of how this gets out into the wild in general. Because that's where I was zero in on and trying to figure out how to like prevent stuff like this from happening.
The pipeline procedures question is like somewhat interesting, I think, and they'll definitely like have to do it for like regulatory or legal or even just probably stock price reasons. But like, I actually don't think it's the thing that matters most in the sense that you have this question with any system that like has various checks in it of just like, oh, like if this one thing like isn't working, like what is the expected behavior, what a failure rate of like some given part of the system. And like just because it was caught, like you had a failure over in step 1 but it gets caught in step 3, like how bad is that failure in step 1? And so like there's shortcomings there in that this failure wasn't caught. But there's another question of just like parsers are the easiest thing to fuzz and test, right? Like, so there's one side of like, don't parse in the kernel if you can avoid it. But there's another side of like, if you're writing a parser, like we know how to do that well. Like the cryptographers are pretty good at this, like parsing, major browsers still parse X509 certificates in the browser process because like,
they have to.
Cryptographers have got, because 1, they have to, there's nowhere else to do it. And 2, like the cryptographers have realized like how to spend the right amount of effort to make a parser that is like up to a standard that is kind of higher than the parser standard might be in other situations. But the reality is like, of the code that you could write at a like very high level of reliability, parsers are like the most straightforward thing to test and to fuzz. And like, sure, you can go into all of these policies and procedures about the deployment process, but like, I would almost rather see them skip that and just be like, we have fixed our parser.
Which is why I want to give them the benefit of the doubt that they did take this change of this config, tested it against their parser, and then it passed, and then they built it for deployment. And that's where, and then something went wrong in the build, the CD process, the packaging process, the release pipeline, not the testing pipeline. But that also means that you have to test twice, or you're testing in the wrong place. Because if you're testing before build and it passes, and you test after build and it doesn't pass, then you've got a problem. But I don't know that much. But I generally agree with like, we know how to test and write parsers better now. And it feels like this one is like an extremely non-risk tolerant parser. So, I don't know. I'm very curious. There's been debate about like why this is written this way anymore, because Windows, in later versions of Windows, they have made safer hooks via the kernel or via that surface available to software like CrowdStrike. I think this was like their Falcon sensor to use in a safer way. And like, why aren't they doing that? And it's like, well, I have a feeling that this is deployed to hospitals. This is deployed to airline systems. This is deployed to fucking Starbucks. Like, this is deployed across a lot of diverse Windows instances. I think that there's a lot of them that aren't up to speed and making those hooks available. And so they're doing it like kind of the tried and true and available way.
Yeah, in terms of like diverse deployments though, I moved recently and I'm trying to get my car title because
Annoying.
I need to like register at a new place. And so I went to log in to my car loan portal and it was down. I was like, man, I have all the things to go down because of CrowdStrike. I did not expect Mazda Financial to do that.
It wasn't even like the local municipality, like, Secretary of, Department of Transportation.
No, it was not the DMV. It was like the car loan portal where I wanted to go to pay off the loan so that they would send me my title, because that just felt easier than requesting they send a title to the DMV.
So one last thing before we move on from this is why I thought Windows has their own built-in AV security thing, like Windows Defender, or equivalent for maybe something. I know there is one on Mac OS and I'm forgetting their name right now. So why don't we just all use Windows Defender, and why is that not fine and sufficient? And I don't have a good answer, except that CrowdStrike does a lot more and is a lot nicer to use on the back end as an operator of an EDR solution. And Windows Defender is just not enough. And so there's a reason that CrowdStrike has a market. Because
this podcast does not endorse any individual antivirus product.
No, I don't but there's a reason that markets have found a solution. And it's that Windows Defender did not just completely be solved it, just use this for free. It comes with your Windows. And what Thomas says, you run CrowdStrike in 2024 instead of back in the day, you would use McAfee antivirus, because that's what you do. And when the built-in stuff into your OS is not sufficient as a real operator.
And instead of talking about compliance, let's talk about literally anything else.
Do you want to talk about post-quantum standards compliance?
I'd like to talk about how there still aren't any post-quantum standards. It is difficult to comply with compliance guidelines that provide deadlines in terms of when communication needs to be post-quantum secured, if the algorithms that are post-quantum have not even been standardized yet.
Yeah, but
let alone whether or not they're suitable for use in the real world.
Yeah, we have a draft. We've had a draft for a year. We're talking about the NIST, the United States National Institute of Standards and Technology, the post-quantum cryptography competition that they've been, or whatever. They don't call it a competition, whatever. The thing that they've been running for 8 years now, at least. The standards, the official FIPS standards for MLChem, which is a new kind of key agreement based on lattices, MLDSA, which is a new signature based on lattices, and SLH DSA, which is stateless hash-based signatures, which is not based on lattices, it's based on signatures, are supposed to drop any day now. And it's all just rumors and whispers and just sort of people sending emails to anyone that might have an in at NIST. I've been refreshing their website every fucking day, and just watching and preparing and just waiting, because they signaled publicly that they might be ready by end of summer / September. And then I think someone from NIST was on stage somewhere and they were like, no, MLChem document is done. We finished it and we've sent it up the chain, and we didn't hear anything about the other two, but we think they're all going together in one fell sweep. Falcon is not done yet. They've told us that the Falcon is another lattice related signature scheme that's not done yet because it's harder, I think. That's coming later. But these three, it's very possible that they will drop any day now. And as soon as they drop, it's like a starting gun for like lots of people in industry, especially anyone that has to be compliant with like these memos from the United States executive branch about being compliant with the systems that you sell and deploy to the federal government. But also there's all these other systems of like, if you want to be FIPS compliant, if you want to deploy the software in a national security system, they've already outlined like you must have these XYZ things. And they have to be done by like 2030. Some of these deadlines are like real soon for the like big infrastructure and organizational deployment lift.
Yes and no. So the part of the problem here also
the number
is that
on the page.
There's a number on the page, but the page isn't actually a compliance document. So like the one that people cite a lot is the DoD that has this document that says this is what the new CNSA guidelines are, the algorithms for computer network security or something like that, which
for
is basically
national
like,
security systems. Yes.
Yeah, which is basically what are you allowed to use to secure top secret data.
Yeah.
And they're like, we are going to switch this to require post-quantum, which if you buy the post-quantum threats, then like that's a very reasonable thing to issue a document saying the next version of this 2.0 will look like this, and a little bit of guidance on like prioritize, store now, decrypt later over signatures, and like here's how like this interacts with like web browsers, and here's how this interacts with like long-term storage and software and firmware signing, and then it provides some like suggested dates.
Yep.
But like this document is non-normative. It literally says like this document is describing how we will decide the process, and they're like it will be based on standards from NIST. It will be based on these threats and needs are different priorities and so on. But it has some years in it, including things like 2025 for browsing traffic. And it's well, if NIST hasn't released a single final version of the standard in mid 2024, like you're not going to by default have like post-quantum signatures anywhere in 2025.
Oh, yeah.
But notably, the 2025 year is just a recommendation in this document, and then it says 2030 is the deadline. But this document isn't even the deadline because it's a non-normative document. So all this to say, the only thing that matters for like actual migration to post-quantum is that NIST standardizes algorithms, and then from there people can work on solutions. But as long as these algorithms are not standardized, there's like very limited cases where they can be used in anything outside of like an experimental context.
Yep. And I will point to yet another document. That's the OMB memo, which does say goal of mitigating as much of the quantum risk as is feasible by 2035. So that's like different because that's for different systems in the US government than these national security systems that the thingy from CNSA 2.0 is talking about. But that gives it a little more oomph. But it is still like try
it's also another
to mitigate.
5 years. It's like there's a big difference between 2030 and 2035 when it comes to like trying to migrate the web peak.
Yeah. But what you ended on is absolutely true. Is like we literally can't like make progress until we have a final standard of like the thing that everyone is pointing to. Including all these things in the US government, but also countries around the world are watching this, process, this NIST PQ process, like proceed. And they are keeping an eye on it as sort of like, we're going to like, take suggestions from that. And maybe we'll add a little bit more to our stuff. Like a lot of the governments in other parts of the world are much more comfortable with hybrid solutions for like their systems than this CNSA document for national security system, which is basically like no hybrid if you can help it. We want it to be pure PQ, which is a big vote of confidence for things like MLChem, because they're saying like MLChem 1024 will be like by itself sufficient and required to protect a key exchange for, top secret, communications or storage or whatever. Other governments are like, sure, MLChem and Frodo, or MLChem and, I don't know, Entru or something like that. I don't want to spend the whole summer just sort of waiting, especially because I thought we would get it at the end of the summer. And they're like, no, it's going to be like any day now. It's like, fuck, just do it already.
There's another memo from OMB, M2302, I believe, that says So like it requests that agencies basically inventory their post-quantum risk in terms of like what systems would be affected by a quantum computer. And if this memo percolates down to you, if you're like at an agency deputy CIO or whatever, my advice to you is to ignore the condition and just send back a list of all of your computer systems. Right? Like, I think the practical matter is that it will affect all of it and nothing is standardized yet. So instead of trying to ask people whose job is not to think about quantum computers and cryptography all day, if you get this memo, just ask for a list of all of your computers.
And then it's like, cool, we have an inventory, and now what? Now what do we do? And like, people are not... They're asking that question. They're sort of like, what's the next step? How do we remediate this thing? That's a good question that not a lot of people have a straightforward answer to.
I think we have talked, I don't want to say extensively because I don't think we've done a full like episode on this, but I feel like we talk about this every other episode because it's like related to the day jobs of serverless here in some form, where we're just like, oh, all of these transitions are hard and there are no good solutions and these algorithms are very big.
Yep.
But like a bunch of that discussion is even just predicated on like, can we get a final version of the standard?
Yes, especially because like there's the ongoing signature on-ramp. So like they're going to drop MLDSA, which is like a digital signature that one could theoretically replace a bunch of stuff in the web PKI with. But it's so big. The keys are big and the signatures are big. SLHDSA is probably good for signing firmware or things like that. It's not good for online signatures and putting them on the wire, for example, or in your like end-to-end encrypted communications or anything like that. MLDSA is only one of these 3 drafts. Falcon might land later, but it's got some sharp edges that it's unclear if people will be happy with. Even that is still kind of big. The on-ramp is supposed to find more signature algorithms that will give different security guarantees. So maybe not based on lattices, it'll be based on something else. But all of them, except for SkiSign in the on-ramp, are still too big. They're still too big, and like, that's going to take more time. So like, 1, we want these things to land, period. But 2, when they do land, we still have a lot of hard work to do to figure out how to make these things work in things like the web PKI, because none of our options are very good. And there's going to be some hard architectural design, organizational migration decisions, designs, and planning and coordination to figure out how to make any of this work that doesn't significantly degrade the experience that users of the secure internet have come to expect for the past decade.
I think let's go back to Vegas for a second and talk about the schedule Black Hat. I think, I don't know, maybe you will stick around through DEF CON. I don't believe in DEF CON, so...
Okay, why don't you believe in DEF CON?
I like conferences where I can get coffee and water in the hallway. And that's not really a thing at DEF CON.
No.
And also... I'm on the review board for Black Hat, as is everyone else on this podcast. And so we kind of have a little bit of a connection there. So I tend to go for Black Hat if I go at all. I think we'll all be there for Black Hat. And so let's, I don't know, maybe highlight a few things that we saw on the schedule for 2024.
Yeah. We wanted to talk about this more in depth earlier in the year on the podcast, but this Terrapin attack on SSH, breaking SSH channel integrity by sequence number manipulation, this is pretty cool. This is very cool.
This is the best. This attack is it's not Drown level for me. Drown is still my favorite applied crypto attack, but this is still one of, so like when I first started engaging with cryptography stuff, maybe in like the late 90s or whatever, you run into like SSL3 and like the SSL transcript hash. And I was in my 20s or whatever, or my early 20s when this was, God, I'm old. But if you're like a normal programmer and you're like your first experience of dealing with a serious cryptographic protocol, and Paul Kocher designed SSL3. Like SSL3 is terrible, but that's mostly because we didn't know as much as we know now. But like a serious cryptographer designed most of SSL3, right? Your first experience of it is like, okay, so you're doing a handshake, but at the same time you have to do a running hash over all of the components of the handshake. which is a giant pain in the ass. And it's like, at the time, it was hard for me to even get my head around the level of complexity of running a hash over multiple.
It wasn't chained. It wasn't what we have in TLS 1.3 now, which is sort of like updated chained hashes.
I'm saying these things out loud, and like, so like I can throw together like a noise implementation in like, in a couple of hours now, right? But back then it seemed like just moon science to me, right? So Terrapin, right? So there's like, you can think of like two lines of major encrypted transport protocols, right? Like there's the TLS line and there's the SSH line of protocols, and sometimes they have the same vulnerabilities and sometimes they don't, right? So in the original SSH 2.0 design, the first serious, like SSL3 is the first serious TLS, or the first serious SSL protocol, and SSH2 is the first serious SSH protocol, right? They do not do a transcript hash, like a full transcript hash over all the messages that happen, right? So instead, what they do is it's kind of the same deal where you're just building up to doing a DH, right? You're just going to do a Diffie-Hellman and do a key exchange. So they look at this. I'm putting myself in their heads, but I wasn't in the room, but I'm pretty sure I'm right about this. They're running a handshake to do a DH. So they look at this whole thing and they say, well, here are the things that contribute to the DH that we're going to do. Here's all the things that matter. So what we're going to do is, instead of hashing every message that happens in the transcript, we are going to just hash the things that could ever hit the key exchange, right? Which is like, what could go wrong, right? And it turns out, like, so you can't influence the key exchange, but what you can do is throw off the sequence numbers now, right? Because they don't go into the key exchange anymore.
Effectively
which means you can
controlled.
like pad out, like you can eat messages basically. You can snip out a message from it. And like the only problem with this is that like, and I haven't looked at this in a little while, so I could be wrong about this, and maybe they're gonna get up on stage and show like a really, really awesome outcome for this. The only like this is like, as cryptographic protocol things go, I think this is a pretty devastating attack. Like, this is not a great property for a cryptographic protocol to have, but I think in practice and real SSH deployments doesn't matter a whole lot. So SSH has, after the handshake, like option messages that you can send to like ratchet up security or add restrictions or whatever. I forget what the options are, right? So you can snip those out as I remember, but like nobody uses them, so it doesn't matter. I think is the outcome, but still, like that is the thing you could do, because they're only hashings, they're only doing authenticity for the things that matter for the key exchange, but not for like the meta stuff for that runs the protocol. You can fuck with that stuff. It's a really neat attack.
And like this smells like things that were optimizations in protocol design back in the day, in like the 90s, early 2000s, where they're like, we only try to hash or authenticate or do extra work over the things that absolutely need to be done, such as like just the Diffie-Hellman, the things that will influence the value of the Diffie-Hellman handshake. But the like especially in TLS 1.3, like they've basically been like, fuck it. Like it's really hard to let some things be manipulable by an attacker and other things not be. Like the whole transcript needs to be like chained together in a like, a hash tree, basically. Like you do every handshake, every piece of the agreement is getting hashed, and then every new thing is also getting hashed and also getting hashed. And they've even gone farther just recently with encrypted client hello, so that there's even more information that is not even visible, let alone manipulatable by an adversary when you're trying to, set up a session in TLS 1.3. And this attack smells of like, we learned these lessons the hard way and fixed them in TLS 1.3 and other places in TLS, and they haven't quite percolated down into SSH.
What gets me here is that this is like just such an obvious difference between the TLS protocol and SSH, right? So it's like, this was discovered relatively recently, right?
Yeah.
Like I think at the end of 2023 is when the preprint came out or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So like, but like that huge distinction between the two protocols, between SSH and TLS, has been there for decades, right? And it took until now for someone to look at this and say, wait a minute, these are not the same protocol. What is the consequence of these not being the same protocol? And the consequence was that the security of the other protocol fell apart, right? So it makes me happy to be in a world where at any moment something like this might come out of somewhere else.
Can I say something slightly embarrassing, which is that when we were working on the weak Diffie-Hellman stuff in grad school, like the logjam attack, so we were looking at TLS, And we were looking at like Diffie-Hellman group parameters and other protocols. And I was tasked with figure out what group parameters SSH uses, and also go look at the SSH protocol and figure out if it has the same protocol vulnerability that logjam represented in TLS. And I looked at that handshake for a while. And I was like, no, this is a good handshake because unlike in TLS, it's got a signature over the full set of key agreement parameters. And I missed like what turned into Terrapin. I was like, oh, well, it's got the signature. So like we can't strip the thing that didn't have the signature in TLS and then moved on. But I missed it. But okay. I don't know. I also wasn't, not to like come up with excuses, but I was primarily interested in implementing the handshake to get a scanner out of it, because at the end of the day, as mentioned repeatedly, Thomas is an attack person, Deirdre is a real cryptographer, and I am just a network engineer who happens to like reliable systems.
They should credit you on stage for leaving that bug there for them.
I'm the cryptographer that likes to build the good thing. I'm still not very good at writing proofs yet, but I'm okay with that for now. Yeah, I mean, like you were looking at weak DH, and you were looking at these things that influence the actual Diffie-Hellman value, which is protected. It was the part of this that is protected, and the sequence values and these other optional messages were not protected. So like, I don't blame you at all. You were looking for something quite specific, and it was protected against that. But if you were just sort of looking around at what else you could notice in it, maybe you would have saw something like that. But it's okay.
Yeah. Our approach, we were sometimes we collaborated with people who did like actual formal modeling and proofs. But the way that we got into Drown, for example, was just one day someone mentioned that SSLv2 was like still enabled by default on a bunch of stuff. And we were like, that's probably buggy. And then we just applied the Feynman method to OpenSSL's code. And we were like, there's gotta be something here. And we just stared at it. And then we were like, we have found like logic bugs, not cryptography bugs.
Oh, yeah.
And then we were like, then we like contacted OpenSSL, and they were like, have you met these other people that found related cryptography bugs? I think your stuff might help them. And we took a quadratic attack down to a linear attack because we just stared at the code and found bugs with pointers.
Okay, so did you find a buggy implementation of a good protocol? We
found a buggy implementation of a bad protocol, and that's SLV2 with Drown. But yeah,
okay.
But we found the bug. We found the bug in the code in the implementation, and then like Nimrod Avaram found the bug and his collaborators found the bug in the cryptography. And then when you put them together, it made the attack on the cryptography much more efficient.
Oh God, this is the shit that keeps me up at night, because all of this shit is so hard. It's literally like writing down something that's non-buggy and then translating it into code in a non-buggy way. And then you might have a different bug over here and another different bug over here, and then you combine them and you get something that is completely just, and I hate it. This is such hard shit, and I hate it. It's all hard, and I don't know.
Yeah. If you're familiar with the Matt Blaze attack on like physical keys, where you target one cut at a time, that is basically the bug that we found in the OpenSSL implementation, which let you target the key one byte at a time as opposed to all of it at once.
Yeah.
Remind me of the Matt Blaze attack.
So in a master keyed system, if you have access to just an individual key for a single door, this isn't quite accurate, but more or less, the master key will have one cut and your key will have another cut, meaning the like various points would be at different heights, and you know the height of your key. So that means that for every individual cut, you just need to find the cut that's at the other position. So if you can duplicate, there's 10 cuts in a key, and you duplicate your key and you make 9 of them the same, and then you try all 10 values for the one cut that you've changed, you'll learn, my key is at height 4, the other valid cut is at height 8, therefore the master key must have a height 8. And then you do that for each cut in the key. And so it takes what was like an exponential attack like, let's just guess all the cut heights, to becoming linear in the number of cuts.
So Tai Duong called that the Hollywood attack, right? But that's my mental model of most like actual cipher attacks is Tai Duong's Hollywood thing, which is, it's Hollywood because if you do printfs while you're debugging the attack or whatever, you'll see like the string of gibberish, like the actual, like the ciphertext And at the end, you'll just see kind of like the rotating letter as you figure out letter by letter, what the last. So that's how Beast worked, for instance, is how like the CBC padding oracle works. If you do printf there, it'll look like it's working it out one byte at a time, like in the movies, because that's what you're doing, right? Is bringing the attack down to guessing 1 out of 256 values instead of 1 out of 2 to the 128th, right? So okay,
exactly.
Cool.
That's very cool. Anything else on Black Hat schedule we want to highlight?
Well, just note, I think the network security track is quite good this year. There's several interesting things in it. There's attacks on DNS servers. I don't know if that involves DNSSEC or not, Thomas, but if it does, I'm sure you'll be there to laugh. There's exploiting VPNs, which is always a fun reminder that your security appliance might make you less secure. And there's stuff about vulnerabilities in RPKI validation, which, might actually start to become relevant as RPKI deployment becomes more of a thing. So I think it's interesting to look at it from that standpoint.
What is RPKI?
RPKI is the PKI used to secure BGP router communication so that you can't spoof routes.
Yeah, that's important. And yeah, but why is it different? Why is it? Never mind.
Well, you're not authenticating domain names, so like something the authorities and things have to be different. But it's still just X509 certificates, I think, and signatures.
It's different, but not significantly different.
It's another PKI because it's another use case.
Yeah. Okay. All right. There's some keynotes. Jen Westerly, who's running CISA, is the primary keynote.
It's Jen Easterly, not Jen Westerly.
Fuck. Perfect.
Yeah, we're
Easterly?
keeping that one in. That's an incredible.
Keep it in. That's perfect. That's
the Waluigi to Luigi.
They're the primary keynote. They're like the main stage, whatever you call it. There's
the Michelob Ultra Arena.
Is it really? Is this?
At least that's one of the keynote arenas.
It's still Mandalay Bay. It's all Mandalay Bay. Yeah, the Michelob also to be seen.
That's the one that's like the fight stadium, right?
Oh,
like
God.
if you think about like Ocean's 11 and the fight night, right? It's like that, and that's
Do
a
they have
different
UFC
casino.
there?
Oh, something's there.
Is what's his fucking face? Is Mike Tyson gonna kill one of those YouTubers in a fight there in the near future? No,
but if you go one door over to the Luxor, you can go to the esports arena, and you can also see America's Got Talent live.
I do have a soft spot for the Luxor just because I like pyramids. Anyway, not pyramid schemes, just pyramids. There's another keynote, a fireside chat with Moxie Marlinspike with Jeff Moss, who's the guy that runs DEF CON and all that stuff. What's his handle? I forget his handle.
Dark Tangent.
Yes, Dark Tangent.
I don't know if he still runs it, but he definitely started both DEF CON and then Black Hat as like the corporate version of DEF CON.
Yes, DEF CON was absolutely first because they needed a place to send their people with budgets to learn about all the tips and tricks from the hackers at DEF CON, and they couldn't do it via the DEF CON name, so they created Black Hat, and that's why it's very different in vibes, even though DEF CON is massive now. And yeah, I guess they're going to talk about privacy and security and other things like that. And Moxie's moved on from stuff with Signal, and he's been doing some other cool adventures. So I'm interested to see if he's going to talk about that sort of stuff. But let's see.
My other advice for Black Hat is, the first time I went was when I talked back in like 2016 about Drown, and
cool.
I was like, oh, I don't want to go to this vendor floor. That's for, these like, I do real work. I'm not going to the vendor floor. Nowadays, I strongly recommend that if you're there, you do go to the vendor floor. If not to buy anything, that's like a terrible idea to buy something like at one of these. But it's just interesting to see like what is going on, like how are people marketing things, like what are the things that people are trying to sell, because like we're a very tactical focused podcast, and we have perhaps a different perspective than like, if you're actually responsible for securing an organization, like what are like the people that are being sold to there, like why, how are these being marketed, like what are they going after, and a good chunk of it doesn't make sense. A chunk of the people in the booth like won't actually know anything about like what it is that's going on, but it's still very interesting. And also, like, you can get pictures with F1 cars because it's ridiculous. And so I do strongly recommend that you actually go and walk around the vendor floor at least a little bit.
Maybe I will.
Let's remember, all those people are in theory making money.
That's true. Oh, God. Yeah. I've avoided it like the plague, but that is a very good idea. I should definitely canvas for, like, if people are shilling for PQ migration or just quantum or quantum key distribution, and like those things are very, very, very different. So, yeah. Cool.
I also recommend that you be careful about, if you do go to the vendor floor, like, consider what you put on your badge. Because if you're not representing your employer on the vendor floor, like in a booth or whatever, but you do want to go talk to other things, you don't necessarily want to like reveal that who you work for, especially if you could be considered a competitor to someone that you go talk to. Or just because, like, if you have a sufficiently large company on your badge, everyone will try to sell you something and you probably don't want to buy it or don't have buying permission for it. So
Street smarts. Those are some black hat street smarts. I don't know. Something like that. Anything else? I'm going to DEF CON. I'm going to DEF CON for at least like a day and a half. So I'll see you around DEF CON. Probably I like to go check in on the crypto and privacy village. And maybe there's also a newish quantum village. It's been around for 1 or 2 years, and they do a lot of post-quantum stuff sometimes. So maybe I'll see you around DEF CON. Awesome.
All right. Well, once again, keep an eye out on our social media or the episode notes for details on the get together in Vegas. Thank you again to Observa for sponsoring it. We're excited to see everybody first or second week of August, depending on how you count, and have a great summer.
Yeah. Security, Cryptography, Whatever is a side project from Deirdre Connolly, Thomas Tachek, and David Adrian. Our editor is Nettie Smith. You can find the podcast online at SCW Pod and the hosts online at Durham Crustalum, at TQBF, and at David C. Adrian. You can buy merch at merch.securitycryptographywhatever.com. If you like the pod, give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you rate your favorite podcast. Thank you for listening and see you in Vegas. Bye.
Also, we're on YouTube now.
Yeah, we are on YouTube.
But not with video of us, just audio.
Yep.
We're on YouTube.